We left things off in 1963, so we'll skip ahead a few more years to 1970 where things get weird, in a fun way. Over at Camp Leahy, a military base in New Jersey where, as you'll recall, Steve Rogers trained, SHIELD is running their global security efforts out of a secret base underneath the camp grounds. Lots of familiar faces are at the base at this time. Peggy Carter is running things as director of SHIELD. Howard Stark frequently makes an appearance to monitor ongoing projects. He's also expecting the birth of his first child, Tony. There's another young scientist here named Dr. Hank Pym, who is experimenting with a unique proprietary particle that can manipulate size and density, which he names after himself because he's humble like that. The Tesseract is also here, being securely kept in storage. Heck, even Arnim Zola is here working freely at the base, hand in hand with the government while planting Hydra seeds under everyone's noses. But why am I focusing on this time at Camp Leahy? Well, on April 7, 1970, a future version of Steve Rogers and Tony Stark arrive at Cap's old base. They're from 2023, but they didn't time jump here directly. No, they actually came from the year 2012, where they failed their initial time heist mission and traveled to 1970 as a last-ditch effort to get what they need. Their time-space GPS devices that Tony invented or will invent require the aforementioned Pym particles to function, but Tony and Steve are fresh out after this jump to New Jersey in 1970. Fortunately for them, Dr. Pym has particles in his lab, so Steve manages to snag some. Remember, to everyone at the base, Captain America is dead. Steve doesn't exactly have the best disguise going into the lab, so he's forced to hide from some suspicious agents when he spots Director Carter in another room. I'll note that this version of Steve is an earlier version on the timeline who hasn't yet decided to use his time travel device to return to Peggy for that dance. Confused yet? Don't worry, it gets worse. It is this moment, seeing her again after all these years while time traveling, that gives him the idea to return to her when his mission is over. Tony, meanwhile, sneaks his way into the lower levels where the Tesseract is stored and manages to take it, but runs into none other than his own father, Howard, before he's able to get out. Tony introduces himself as Howard Potts. Smooth. Look, what would you do if you ran into a younger version of your dad who, from his perspective, hasn't even had his child be born yet? Howard, Stark that is, walks fake Howard Tony out of the SHIELD base and tells him that they're expecting their son to be born soon. Tony sees Howard's butler, Jarvis, whom he names his personal AI after in the future. While making conversation, Tony ends up quoting his own father telling Howard one of his father's favorite sayings: "No amount of money ever bought a second of time." While a nice saying, albeit a bit ironic, coming from the billionaire who invented a means of time travel and is now having a conversation with his long-dead father. Jumping way ahead for a sec to really explain the gravity of this moment for Tony, his parents die when Tony is in college, so it has been a long time since Tony got to speak with his dad. Both Steve and Tony are so close to the people they love and lost, but their mission is too important to compromise the timeline. We'll get to that mission in a future episode when we catch up to this version of them in 2023. Technically, we'll meet this version of them again when we reach 2012 on the timeline. It's weird, right? Yeah. For now, we jump to November 24, 1971, where Loki, the god of mischief, lost a bet to his brother Thor, so he ends up taking a dare on Earth. Loki disguises himself as D.B. Cooper and hijacks a Boeing 727 mid-flight by claiming to have brought a bomb on board. After collecting about $200,000 in ransom, he jumps out of the plane with a parachute to escape the authorities. He ends up losing a lot of money, however, as Heimdall, Asgard's all-seeing and all-hearing gatekeeper and guardian of the Bifrost, uses said Bifrost to teleport Loki back home as he's falling, scattering the money in the process. Unable to explain what happened, the mystery of D.B. Cooper is never solved by the humans of Midgard. In 1972, Dr. Arnim Zola, after living under the protection of the US government for decades, passes away due to a terminal diagnosis. Or so that's what SHIELD is led to believe. His body does, in fact, perish, but his mind is transferred onto roughly 200,000 feet of databanks underneath Camp Leahy. This preserves his mind in the form of artificial intelligence, albeit a contained one trapped in this underground bunker and not connected to the internet, which isn't quite the superhighway yet. Still, with Zola's mind alive and active in a way, he continues to provide SHIELD with insight, wink wink, while overseeing Hydra's efforts. including identifying agents who might be turned as well as individuals who pose a great threat to their plans. Not far from Camp Leahy, over in New York City, a 12-year-old Wilson Fisk is about to do something that will set his life on a dark path. His father, Bill, runs for the New York City Council, believing it will make the family rich. The campaign fails, however, and Bill Fisk is angry and humiliated. Wilson gets bullied by a neighbor for defending his father's campaign, to which his father responds by violently confronting the guy, beating him with a baseball bat. Wilson is forced by his father to participate in the assault, kicking the neighbor repeatedly. This marks a pivotal moment in Wilson's life, exposing him to violence and shaping his future character. Later this same year, things only get worse. Bill is in debt to local mobsters, and his drinking and abusive nature is out of control, leading to regular beatings of his wife. To end his mother's suffering, Wilson kills his father with a hammer, just bashes his brains out with as much effort as a 12-year-old can muster. His mother helps dispose of the body piece by piece in a river over the course of a week, and she gifts Wilson his father's cufflinks as a reminder of his father's, and perhaps his own, true nature. After some more time passes, his mother sends him to live on a farm with relatives. Later in life, Wilson will move to Asia, where he'll spend most of his time abroad. This will further shape his character and his connections, which we'll meet in a future episode. We return to our uncontrollable, time-skipping agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. who have now arrived in 1973. While regrouping at a bar in New York City that doubles as a S.H.I.E.L.D. hangout spot, they discover a list of targets for an early version of Project Insight, a project that Zola has been helping Hydra prepare for. Of course, since we can't break the timeline, our future agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are unable to alert present-time S.H.I.E.L.D. of the project or of Hydra's presence, so we move on. Later, this same year, on September 15th, Howard Stark is preparing for what will be the last of his World Expos by filming a video for the event. He has another motive in mind for the video, as he has uncovered the atomic structure for a new kind of energy-generating element, but is unable to create it in real life due to the limitations of the technology in his time. So, he builds a model of the Expo's fairgrounds that's actually a model of the atomic structure in disguise. He records a private clip for his then 3-year-old son Tony, who makes a quick appearance on the film before being taken away so Howard can focus. He hints at the hidden meaning in the model in a way that no one but Tony will be able to understand. "One day," he says on the video, "you'll figure this out, and when you do, you will change the world." In the mid-1970s, around 74, 75, a man named Karun Patel meets the Eternal Kingo. Their relationship starts when Patel notices something odd about Kingo, the fact that he never seems to age. He saw right through Kingo's ruse, where he pretends to be the son of his previous identity to continue in his own footsteps as a popular Bollywood actor. However, Patel believes that Kingo's a vampire. After confronting Kingo about this, he's told the truth about the Eternals, becoming a trusted confidant and lifelong sidekick to Kingo, working alongside him as his assistant for the decades to come. So earlier I teased but kind of breezed over an important birth just so I could knock out a few memorable dates in order before leaving the 70s. I'm speaking of our other lead man, Tony Stark, who was born on May 29, 1970, not long after Howard had that odd run-in with the so-called Howard Potts. Tony was a bright child and showed promise early on. His privileged life afforded him access to anything he could ever need. At age 4, so again around 74, 75, while Kingo meets Patel over in India, little Tony builds his first circuit board. Jump a couple of years, and at age 6, he builds his first V8 engine. Just imagine what he'll build when he's all grown up. Speaking of kids, however, we turn our attention to the celestial Ego, the living planet, who by now has spent thousands of years planting seeds for his universal expansion plan. By 1980, he's made his way to Earth. While in his avatar form that looks suspiciously like David Hasselhoff, wait, no, he looks a bit more like Kurt Russell. Anyway, Ego ends up falling in love with a human named Meredith Quill, who later gives birth to their son, Peter. Ego doesn't stay in one place too long. It's a large universe, after all, and there are many more planets to visit. But he's inextricably drawn back to Meredith time and time again throughout the 80s. More on them soon. In the early 1980s, a sympathetic and brave nurse helps Isaiah Bradley, who has been wrongfully incarcerated for decades, fake his own death so he can quietly escape prison. You'll recall that he's walking proof that the US government tested their illicit super soldier program on black soldiers without their consent. To avoid recapture, Bradley lives quietly off the grid in Baltimore. So in 1982 and in 83, our favorite agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. make two more skips through time, but their actions are pretty self contained, so I won't get into it here. I'll instead briefly mention a funnier character moment from an aspiring young British actor named Trevor Slattery. He nearly has a break in Hollywood in 85 when he's cast to play a Russian cop in a Cold War crime drama. The network rejects the pilot episode, however, and Slattery ends up taking different sorts of gigs to make ends meet, waiting for his next big break. That won't be for a few more decades, so we'll check back in with Slattery later. Remember Dr. Hank Pym and his unique shrinking Pym particles? Well, the clever doctor also built himself and his wife, Janet Van Dyne, special suits that can use the particles to shrink themselves so they can undergo top secret spy missions for the US government as teeny tiny agents. They are known by only a few by their code names, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Thanks to their shrinking abilities and the limited technology of their time, there isn't much in the way of footage or evidence of their work. They make quite the team, but this marvelous technology isn't without its risks. The supersuits that channel the Pym particles require special regulators to prevent the wearers from going subatomic. Hank fears that there is no way to return from such a journey to a state or place that's purely theoretical at this point. Unfortunately, in 1987, during a daring mission to stop a Soviet missile that is hurtling towards the US, Hank attempts to shrink even further in order to destroy the missile from the inside, but his suit is damaged. Janet Van Dyne doesn't hesitate, goes subatomic, destroys the missile, but isn't able to return and is thus presumed dead. Hank, though, firmly believes she is still alive somewhere and just lost in the quantum realm, another dimension that's incredibly small and, at this point, completely unknown to us. Hank is left to raise their only daughter, Hope, by himself. His and his wife's actions as S.H.I.E.L.D. superheroes are kept a secret even from Hope, so Hank lies to her about her mother's death, claiming it was a car accident. In more sad news, Hope isn't the only one to lose a mother so young. Ego keeps visiting Meredith Quill on Earth, but becomes annoyed that this affection towards her is distracting him from his greater mission, so he plants a tumor inside her brain. Meredith eventually succumbs to the illness in 1988 and passes away, surrounded by her family, moments after she gives her son mixtapes of her favorite music to remember her by. A devastated and angry Peter runs away from the hospital in tears. As he is crying in a nearby field, a Ravager spaceship arrives and abducts Peter. They are acting under Ego's orders, who wants his son brought to him for something very important. Peter is the key to Ego's expansion plans. Yondu Udonta, the chief of the Ravagers, doesn't complete the delivery he was paid for, choosing instead to keep Quill and raise him as a Ravager, a roaming crew of criminals in space. So, space pirates? Yeah. For a Celestial who is essentially immortal, it was a really dick move to kill Meredith instead of, spending another 50 years with her while she grows old. Had he stuck around even a little while, he could have raised Peter in his own image instead of sending the Ravagers to capture him, but I digress. We shift back to Hank Pym, who, later this year in 88, is busy running dangerous experiments with fellow scientists Elias Starr and Bill Foster as they research the quantum realm. In addition to that research, Foster leads Project Goliath, which uses the Pym particles in the other direction, enlarging objects, including the wearer of a special suit. He tests it, of course, on himself and manages to grow to a record height of 21 feet tall. He only lists 6 feet on his dating profile, though. #humble. Meanwhile, Pym and Starr butt heads so often that Elias Starr is ousted from their lab. Desperate and determined to continue his research, Starr conducts independent experiments out of a lab in Argentina, only to tragically die alongside his wife due to an explosion of quantum energy. Their daughter, Ava, is also in the explosion but manages to survive. However, her molecular stability is compromised, granting her the ability to phase through solid objects. Later recruited by S.H.I.E.L.D. for high-level espionage, she is given the codename Ghost. Around the same time, Earth receives a visitor from another planet. This time it's a Kree. The Kree-Skrull War is at its height, and a Kree scientist by the name of Mar-Vell, that's Mar-Vell, became ashamed of the way her own people subjugated the Skrulls. She manages to help a group of Skrull refugees escape to Earth. Well, near Earth, meaning in our orbit, as they live aboard Mar-Vell's spaceship/laboratory, which has a cloaking ability so it's not picked up by any human satellites. They managed to make it this far without being caught, but this lab isn't fast enough nor the right vessel to explore space in order to find the Skrulls a new, suitable home. Marvell chose Earth for a reason, so while the Skrulls wait patiently on her ship, she goes down to Earth posing as a human scientist named Wendy Lawson. She somehow joins the US government's Project Pegasus, where she's able to work with the Tesseract. Her goal is to use it to develop a lightspeed engine that can help the Skrulls find a new home far away from the Kree. More on Lawson shortly. First, we jump back to Hank Pym, who, in 1989, storms into a conference room inside of the unfinished Triskelion building in Washington, D.C., the building that will become S.H.I.E.L.'s new HQ. Pym is angry after he discovered that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been trying to replicate his particles without his supervision, so he resigns in protest to Director Carter and Howard Stark, who try but fail to convince Hank to stay. Okay, another quick step back before we move forward, this time to chronicle the upbringing of Carol Danvers. She was born in late 1965 and didn't have an easy time growing up. As a girl, she was always doubted, even by her parents who showed clear favoritism toward her older brother. She wasn't the type to just sit around and take no for an answer, and like Steve, she never gives up, always gets back up. Also, like Steve, Carol finds herself drawn to service and joined the Air Force when she turned 18, sometime around 1983-84. 6 years in, and she's a test pilot for the Air Force using the call sign Avenger. There it is. I said the thing. In 1989, Danvers is selected to be the first pilot to fly the new Aces jet that uses Wendy Lawson's Tesseract-powered engine. It is a two-seater with Danvers in control and Lawson as co-pilot. The only reason I mention that is because of the poor timing, since while they're in flight, a Kree Star Force soldier named Jan Rog has arrived, having finally located Marvell, and shoots down the test plane. The two survive the crash landing, and Danvers realizes Lawson isn't who she said she is because her blood is blue. Also realizing that this enemy wants Lawson's new engine, Carol shoots it, destroying the core. This sends out a massive blast of energy. Because Danvers is next to the plane, she is flung far, but as she is thrown from the blast, her body absorbs some of that energy. Jan Rog kills Marvell and, rather than kill Carol, he takes her back with him to his planet, Hala, to study her. You see, that explosion ended up imbuing Carol with incredible powers and abilities, but it also blocked her memory. She is nursed back to health on Hala and then recruited into Starforce so they can train and control her. Carol, not remembering who she is given the name Veers, as that is all that remained visible on her damaged dog tags, the last 4 letters of her last name, in case that wasn't clear. The Kree quickly realize that this human's newfound powers are way too vast and that she will pose an incredible threat if she ever realizes how powerful she really is. So they use their advanced technology to fashion a small chip in her neck that dampens her abilities. What they tell Carol, however, is that they are the ones who gave her these powers and that they can take them back any time they wish. You know, like liars. Back on Earth, Carol Danvers is presumed dead after the Aces crash. Her best friend and fellow test pilot, Maria Rambeau, mourns her loss along with Maria's young daughter, Monica, who look to Carol as family. Meanwhile, the Skrull refugees remain trapped aboard Marvell's lab, just orbiting the planet, waiting to be rescued as the years go by. Also in '89, Hydra discovers Jiaying, an inhuman who hasn't aged since World War II. Daniel Whitehall, formerly Werner Reinhardt, reverse engineers Jiaying's powers, restoring his youth by dissecting her and leaving her for dead. She is found by Calvin Zabo, who will later become her husband. He helps her survive by draining life energies from an entire village. This hits S.H.I.E.L.D.'s radar, so they take Daisy, Jiaying and Calvin Zabo's daughter, for protection. The parents pursue, killing many S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, but the survivors hide Daisy in an orphanage under the name Sky. Traumatized, Jiaying leaves Calvin and retreats to the inhuman colony of Afterlife. On December 16, 1991, Hydra sends out the Winter Soldier on another mission. This time, he assassinates Howard and Maria Stark, leaving Tony an orphan. Besides eliminating a threat to their terror group by killing Howard, the mission is to retrieve something the Starks were transporting that night. 5 samples of super soldier serum are acquired and later used to create more soldiers like Bucky. They train in a lab in Siberia, and when they're not on missions, they're placed in cryogenic storage. Howard's longtime business partner, Obadiah Stane, immediately takes over as interim CEO of Stark Industries after their deaths. But Tony, already 21 years old, decides to assume control of his inheritance within a few months. Shares of the company naturally transfer to him, and since it's his family's name on the building, plus he's proven himself a genius by now having graduated summa cum laude from MIT at just 17, there is no pushback from the board when Tony requests the position of CEO. In other tragic news, over in Oakland, California, the king of Wakanda, T'Chaka, visits his brother, Prince Njobu, who is there as a sleeper agent. T'Chaka confronts him after having learned that his own brother helped out a mercenary named Ulysses Claw with a deadly heist in order to steal a quarter ton of vibranium from Wakanda. Njobu's justification is that he intends only to supply vibranium weapons to oppressed people around the world so they might overthrow those that exploit them. But King T'Chaka insists that he return home and answer for his crimes, since it's very much illegal for any vibranium to leave Wakanda. Once Njobu finds out that it was his trusted friend James who sold him out because he's a spy for Wakanda whose name is actually Zuri, he pulls out a gun and tries to shoot Zuri. King T'Chaka reacts quickly, and in an attempt to stop the gunshot, he kills his own brother with the claws from his Black Panther suit. The king and Zuri leave, and Njobu's son, Eric, is left alone to find his father dead in their apartment. Njobu had told Eric about his true heritage, so from this day on, Eric swears to continue his father's mission and take revenge on Wakanda's rulers. In 1994, a 9-year-old Matt Murdock saves an elderly man from being hit by a Rand oil and chemicals truck. In the process of this heroic act, hazardous chemicals splash on Matt's face, causing him to lose his sight permanently. When he later wakes in the hospital, Matt discovers that he has developed heightened hearing, which initially causes him great pain. His father comforts him by letting Matt touch his face for recognition. He lost his sight in the accident but gained heightened senses. Over the next few months, Matt learns to read Braille and keeps his enhanced abilities secret. His father, Jack Murdock, continues boxing despite losing most fights. One day, Matt overhears Jack being offered money to lose a fight against Carl Creel. Jack, rather than throwing the fight, wins, defying expectations. He had placed a bet on himself through a friend and put the money in his son's name. After the match, Jack is murdered by local mobsters. Matt discovers his father's body on the street, marking a tragic turning point in his life. After spending some time in an orphanage, Matt meets Stick, an old man who is also blind. Recognizing Matt's enhanced senses, he offers to train him to control those abilities and learn to defend himself. He quickly becomes a skilled fighter but grows attached to Stick, who leaves him for what he thinks is a weakness. Murdock won't hear from Stick again for many years. That doesn't mean, however, that Stick won't keep tabs on him, as he has great ambitions for Matt in mind, wanting him to be a soldier in the war against the Hand. Okay, it's now the summer of 1995. Before we dive into the crazy summer that Carol Danvers has that year, I want to briefly mention a certain fake family living in a small town in Ohio. A young Natasha Romanoff lives with her sister, Yelena, and who they think are their parents, Alexei and Melina. However, the truth is that her sister is not really her sister, and neither are her parents actually her parents. Alexei Shostakov is Russia's attempt at a super soldier nicknamed the Red Guardian, and Melina Vostokov is a scientist. The young girls don't even know they're actually Russian, but they're about to find out. Alexei infiltrates S.H.I.E.L.D.'s North Institute and steals data from what is actually part of Hydra's Winter Soldier program. The Red Room, a Russian spy program led by General Dreykov, plans to use the information to make its own assassins. Once they acquire the data, they flee the US back to Russia, where the fake family is broken up since the mission is over, and the girls, Natasha and Yelena, are split up and forced to enter the Widow's Assassin training program. Alexei later makes the mistake of criticizing the Russian government, they don't like that, and ends up incarcerated by Dreykov in the Seventh Circle prison, which is aptly named after a place that houses the violent in Dante's Inferno. Now coming back around to the adventures of our favorite amnesiac pilot, Carol, or Veers as she's told her name is, has spent the last 6 years training with the Kree Star Force Division under the supervision of Commander Jan Rog. She's now an elite agent and goes on many missions with the team, mostly hunting Skrulls. She still cannot remember anything about her past or who she even is, but has started to get these odd dreams about a female scientist. It's actually snippets of Mar-Vell that Veers is seeing. Jan Rog's team goes on a mission to a border planet named Torfa, where Veers is captured by the Skrull general Talos. Talos uses his technology to forcibly read her memories as he seeks information about Mar-Vell's research. It leads them to planet C-53, aka Earth. By the time Veers regains consciousness and escapes the ship, they have already made it into Earth's orbit. She falls out of the ship and crashes into a Blockbuster video store. Remember those? Somewhere in Southern California. The Blockbuster incident is called in and makes its way to S.H.I.E.L.D., who are curious about a mysterious suspect that looks like they're dressed for laser tag. Agents Nick Fury and Phil Coulson arrive to question Veers, who tells them about the threat of the shape-shifting Skrulls. S.H.I.E.L.D. hasn't dealt with aliens before, so they're skeptical about such a claim, but Veers is quick to trust Fury and shows off her photon blast, which is enough to convince him to help her. Well, that and the death of a Skrull who was posing as Coulson. Fury agrees to help Veers investigate Project Pegasus and takes her to a joint NASA Air Force base known as the Joint Dark Energy Mission Facility, where they find files on the project from the archives. They learn about Dr. Wendy Lawson's use of the Tesseract on the Lightspeed engine, as well as the name of Carol's former partner, Air Force test pilot Maria Rambeau. Before they can leave with the files, they're discovered by Fury's supervisor, Agent Keller, who is actually being simmed by the Skrull General Talos. Fury and Veers manage to use a prototype airship called a quadjet to escape the facility. They fly to Rambeau's home in Louisiana, where Veers is greeted with shock by her former friend and awe by the young Monica Rambeau, who was convinced that Carol was out there somewhere. They tell her her real name is Carol Danvers and show her photos from her past. Memories begin to flood Carol of her real past, including the missing time after the accident. Her blue blood is the result of a life-saving transfusion done by Jan Rog, and her body is a vessel for the energy that Dr. Lawson used on the engine. The explosion imbued her with cosmic powers limited only by her ability to control them. They weren't, in fact, given to her by the Kree, who only meant to control Carol's powers by messing with her mind and leading her to believe that they could take her abilities away at any given moment. Talos arrives on Rambeau's property, but rather than fight it out, he tries another approach. The truth. Hoping for sympathy and understanding, Talos explains to Danvers, Fury, and Rambeau that they are also refugees looking for a long-lost ally, Mar-Vell, who promised to help him and his people find a new planet to live on. Talos explains that Mar-Vell felt so ashamed of her part in the brutal subjugation the Skrulls faced by the hands of the Kree that she vowed to help. Now Carol feels the same way. With some of her memories fully restored, Carol recalls that Jan Rog indeed killed Mar-Vell and only spared Carol's life because the Supreme Intelligence, an AI that runs the Kree Empire, wants control of the cosmic energy in her body. She realizes that the Kree are in fact the aggressors in this long conflict with the Skrulls and vows to make things right, starting with finding and rescuing the remaining Skrull refugees. After the Skrulls retrofit the quadjet for space travel, the new team manages to locate and board Mar-Vell's ship lab, where they find the refugees, including Talos' family, safe and sound. They also find the Tesseract on board. Jan Rog's team manages to locate them, however, and they attack the ship. Still with the chip in her neck, Carol is temporarily immobilized and captured. They hook her up to the Supreme Intelligence that tries and fails to take control of Carol's mind. Carol overpowers the AI and fries the chip, thereby severing the little control the Krees had on her. Carol is finally able to fully use her true power, and in the nick of time too. A Kree commander named Ronan the Accuser has just arrived above Earth with the intention to eradicate all of the Skrulls there, with no regard for the people of Earth. Carol, embracing her new Captain Marvel persona, easily destroys Ronan's fleet, which causes him to retreat quickly. Ronan vows to one day claim her as his new weapon, or at least something just as powerful. Last man standing, Jan Rog attempts to even the playing field by convincing Carol to fight him without her powers, but she quickly takes him out with a blast. It's less like bringing a knife to a gunfight and more like bringing a stick to a nuke fight. He didn't stand a chance. No one really does at this point. Captain Marvel is essentially a living, breathing Infinity Stone. Oh, how did I forget to mention the Flurkin? So, Dr. Lawson had a cat. Well, it's not really a cat, but it looks like the cats of Earth. It's really a Flurkin, an alien creature with large tentacles that come out of its mouth and can eat but not necessarily kill objects much larger than itself and regurgitate them later. Dr. Lawson's Flurkin, named Goose, did just that with the Tesseract, later spitting it up, not unlike a hairball, on Agent Fury's desk. Now the Tesseract is back in the possession of S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury gets a little too close to Goose, unfortunately, who swipes at and scratches Fury's eye, causing him to wear an eye patch for the rest of his life. That's not the story he tells others, though. Carol and Fury both promise to find the Skrull refugees a new home. Carol first has to keep her other promise to stop the Kree Supreme Intelligence from continuing this war on the Skrulls. Before she leaves, she gives Fury a modified pager that, if activated, will reach her so long as she's a couple of galaxies nearby. Despite lacking a spaceship, Carol, now at her full power, has the ability to fly around and survive in space with no special equipment, so she gets her glow on and flies towards Hala. I'm not sure how long that takes, but it's safe to assume that before the year is up, she makes her way back to the Kree planet and flies straight into the base which houses the Supreme Intelligence servers, destroying it completely. Thinking it a job well done, she leaves, not realizing the AI wasn't the only thing she destroyed. An unintended and tragic consequence of destroying an AI that ran the entire Kree civilization was the destruction of said civilization. Civil war breaks out on the planet and will last for decades to come, but more on that in a future episode. Fury, meanwhile, agrees to watch over the Skrulls left behind and help them settle on Earth and blend in with the humans so as not to draw unwanted attention. His wild experience with the Kree, Skrulls, and Captain Marvel opens his eyes, or should I say his eye, to threats that can now come from above. This inspires him to begin a new project that he names after Carol's pilot call sign, the Avengers Initiative. His plan is to find powerful beings and assemble a team to serve as Earth's protectors should anything like this ever happen again. We'll come back to Fury's mission, but there are a few more characters and important dates to cover before we round out the 90s. Wenwu, leader of the Ten Rings and immortal warlord, was searching for the mythical village of Ta Lo for many years. You remember, the one where a soul-eating monster tried to escape into our dimension? Well, in 1996 he finds it. Technically, he finds the entrance, since it's another dimension, but that entrance is being guarded by a woman named Lee. The two fight, and Lee easily bests Wenwu with her elegant martial arts form. Rather than retaliate with his large army, Wenwu returns to the entrance and takes lessons from Lee. The two fall in love and eventually have two kids, a son named Shang-Chi and a daughter named Xialing. Mind you, Wenwu is never permitted entrance into Ta Lo since the elders dislike his past behaviors. That doesn't seem to bother Wenwu much since he found something better: true love. In fact, he takes off the Ten Rings to live a somewhat normal and mortal life with his new family. Later that year, a young boy named Mark Spector is playing with his younger brother Randall in the woods. They are huge fans of an adventure film called Tomb Buster and decide to do their own spelunking. One rainy day, however, causes a flash flood that traps the boys. Only Mark manages to escape, losing his brother. A tragic accident that shatters the family and something Mark's mother will relentlessly punish him for as he grows older. More on Mark later. Back to Fury, who has not only been keeping the Skrulls a secret from everyone, but he manages to use them to his advantage as the natural spies they are thanks to their shape-shifting abilities. He occasionally meets up with various survivors to check in on them and dole out new missions. One such meeting takes place in 1997 in Brixton, London, where Fury meets a young Skrull by the name of Gravik for the first time. Gravik's parents were killed in the last battle with the Kree, and he was told by Talos to trust in Fury. Fury reiterates his promise to them, stating, "While you work to keep my home safe, Carol Danvers and I will find you a new one." A big promise he truly means, but one that will take a long time to fulfill. He still hasn't heard from Carol, nor does he have the technology to scan the universe or the means to grant the Skrulls any land to live on here on Earth. The following year, in New York City, Fury meets with a Skrull named Priscilla, who has assumed a new identity. This is around the time the two start to become familiar with one another. They will later get married in secret. Taking a quick step back, I'll briefly mention the upbringing of one Elektra Natchios, who was born on a Greek island and faced tragedy early in life with their mother's murder. She experienced unexplained visions and voices growing up, leading to behaviors of self-harm. Her father sent her for psychotherapy and insisted on martial arts training, which she began in 1996 when she was 10. Catching back up to our timeline, by 1998, at the age of 12, Elektra could easily defeat multiple grown opponents in combat. She is discovered by none other than Stick, who becomes her mentor and tries to teach her to control her inner rage and violence. Stick is part of a group called the Chaste, whose sole purpose is killing members of the Hand. Elektra has the markings of an excellent soldier, but she struggles with controlling her violent tendencies, nearly killing a training partner during a sparring match. She does later kill that partner after he attempts to hurt her outside of training, so it's technically self-defense. The Chaste imprison her nonetheless, but Stick helps her escape and hide. He gives her a new identity and she's adopted by a wealthy diplomat. Seeing something more in her, Stick warns her that someone will come for her in the future and that she should learn to blend in. Still in 1998, but way further in deep space, we turn our attention to the Titan named Thanos. He is determined to see through his mission to bring back balance to the universe. That's because his civilization fell apart when the rulers of Titan didn't listen to the warnings of overpopulation and lack of resources. In order to avoid this happening on other planets, Thanos firmly believes that half of all living things must be erased from existence. Lacking the means at the moment to do that efficiently, he goes around with his armies and kills half of all living things one planet at a time. This time, it's the Zeoberi people who are subjected to his genocidal plan. Thanos ends up seeing potential in one of the survivors, though, an 8-year-old named Gamora. He adopts her and raises her alongside his other captive/adopted child, Nebula. They become known as the Daughters of Thanos, fierce warriors who help carry out the Titan's mission. Lastly, I want to leave you with a pivotal character moment in 1999, where Mark Spector, now around 12 years old, has been traumatized by his brother's accident and tormented for over 3 years by his mother. As a form of desperate protection, Mark pretends to be a character from the Tomb Buster film named Dr. Stephen Grant. What actually happens, however, is that Mark's personality splits, creating another persona entirely. The two alters will share the same body, unaware of each other for many years to come.